Well, thank you. I think we'll get started. Appreciate all your attendance. Look at this. Let's get attendance in person. First, seen you in a while.
You're Lexus right now.
So I do want to remind everybody, we do record these meetings now, and they do post them on YouTube, so we're recording. And I do want to recognize you have some certificates. You see that? Thank you for your service. A lot of you have been on this board for quite some time, so we appreciate that. Appreciate your help when we need you. No, we haven't met in a little while, but January 23 was the last time. So appreciate your time, and I think Mark Google will come in as the last one in person, but we have a quorum, so we can get started. And I will turn it over to the chair.
Okay, thank you, Jason. So I would like to call to order the August 22nd, 2024, 10:30 a.m. meeting of the Boise City Building Code Board. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for attending in person. And Tiffany, if you want to do a roll call, please.
Certainly. Andy Ersted,
Here.
Riley McAfee.
Here.
I apologize if I pronounced names wrong. Jim Ostrowski,
Here.
Tyler Resnick,
Here.
Greg Brasher, Ron Lawson,
Here.
Matt Blake,
Here.
Russ Phillips, and TJ Sales,
Here.
and Mark Guho. Which,
Can you send him a Zoom link? Apparently he's outside the area. He wants to attend virtually.
oh, he should have already got it. I can send it again.
Thank you, Tiffany, for going through the roll call then. I just want to make mention of the email documents and handouts that are available for the board members for reference for today's meeting. So hopefully everyone received those and had a chance to take a look at them. Otherwise, there's a packet on the desk here for you. I want to next review the agenda items for the board meeting. The call to order and introductions. Should have looked at this a little closer. Okay. Call to order and introductions, meeting minutes from the January 20th, 2023 meeting, which is the last time we were all together. Proposed fire prevention code amendments. Which will be presented, the PDSP study. Topics for future discussion and meeting, and then other items or new business to be heard in front of the board. Primary purpose for today's meeting is to review and discuss the draft ordinance amendments to the City Fire Prevention Code. The City Building Board Code is charged with reviewing these draft ordinance amendments proposals and making a recommendation to City Council. I'd like to, as a reminder, briefly outline the rules for this public meeting. First, city team members shall present the proposed changes to the city code. Then the board will ask questions for clarification from city team members regarding specific change proposals in question. The board shall hear any testimony from the public regarding the proposals in question. Each person wishing to testify shall have up to 5 minutes to do so. The board shall deliberate, ask questions, and shall entertain motions from its members as needed. The final decision and recommendations of the board shall be based upon a roll call vote of a majority of board members present at this meeting. The recommendations will be forwarded to the Boise City. With that, I will move on to the next item on our agenda. That is the meeting minutes approval. The chair would like to entertain a motion to approve or amend the meeting minutes from the last building code board meeting held on January 20th, 2023. We have any motions?
I'll make a motion to approve.
The motion from Tyler Resnick.
I'll second
We have a
it.
second from Andy Ersted. We have a motion and second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, we'll move to a vote. Those in favor of approving the minutes from the January 2023 meeting, please indicate by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes to approve the minutes. Next, we'll move on to the portion where city team members will present the proposed changes. So I will hand that back over to Jason and your team.
Great, thank you, Chair. So I want to introduce Fire Marshal Mike Sonio and Mark Stumbaugh. He's our fire plan review inspection supervisor. And then we've got Mike Jordan here, our building inspection supervisor. And then, Rob Lockwood's our legal rep. So I'm going to kind of drive and kind of run through these proposed amendments, but I'm going to let these two here kind of explain them. They're the experts on them. So if you've got questions or clarifications, please feel free to bring them up during as we review these. This first portion is just kind of the table of contents. So we're just showing what the table of contents changes. There's a section here added in for deputies, time limitation on application, and then extension. And of course, we have to renumber all our existing amendments. And then when we get down here, there's another new section here on single communication path monitoring systems, which is new. And then again, renumbering. We'll go all through all these. And then one on area separation. It's new. And then the last one, which is the bigger one, is the lithium battery section. So there's a large section at the end being proposed on the lithium batteries. So this first one is deputies, and we're going to bring forth other ordinances in the future here, but we have code compliance coming back to planning and development services, which is great for us. We used to have them many years ago. They got pulled away into the city clerk's office. But starting October 1st, they're going to be back in the PDS. So as far as code officials, we're now deputizing code compliance officers into the code. So they're part of helping us out and enforcing the code when we need them. So that's what this section is about, basically adding this code compliance officers being deputized by the fire marshal in this code. So that's what that change is. Then we get into fire department plan review. There's a section amended here on residential. I think we get a lot of questions on this section, right, on residential. So they decided to add more language to kind of clarify this. So I guess I'll let one of you two, do you want to explain kind of that?
Mark and I get pinged a lot on this and get, just recently we're shown the city, the city ordinance that states what we're allowed to review, and we agreed with the person that showed us, and then had to go back around and show her the fire code portion that says we still review residential sites for this, but it was never in city code, so nobody would reference that unless Mark or I showed them out of the fire code, basically. So this is literally just for clarification so that it's, I guess, more readily available, more put in front of people, that citizens of Boise that do look to their code. That's one of these things that'll hopefully eliminate a decent amount of I guess uneducated thought when people making their plans.
So I have a question. Excuse me. In reading this language. Sorry about that. In reading the language here is the intent that any residential addition project that adds fire area to and/or solar installations. Because when I read that, I almost read it as fire and solar installations. You only review it if it's both. So I had a question about that language and whether it's truly clear as to the intent.
Go ahead.
Well, we review anything that would add fire area to an existing building when it comes to additions.
Okay.
And solar installations, because there's fire code requirements for travel paths around the panels.
So my question is that language truly clear? Because I could see someone interpreting that if you add fire area and solar, you're subject to that review. But if you add one or the other, you're
You're
not.
thinking more and or.
Yes.
Or does the comma take care of that, I guess, is separating, be my question.
And I'll leave that to
Mr. Legal.
legal, I'll leave that to legal and staff to determine that, but when I first read it, I had a question in my
But we
mind.
can easily put and or in there.
And I don't want to be the determining factor on that, but I'd like staff or legal to determine.
Yeah,
Is the right one.
We could just like remove the comma and do and slash or.
Yeah.
That probably would have.
I'd leave the comma and then add slash or.
Okay. I like
But it's either way, I think it's pretty clear.
So replace and with or do you want and or?
And.
And or, okay. Okay,
One
So-
quick question.
Yep.
Regarding the wording in the language is this only applying to additions or is it new residences? Or additions to existing residential occupancies?
create a
Just
new residential, comma.
Yeah.
Or additions to existing residential occupancies that add fire area, comma.
Yeah.
Then solar. And then to be reviewed for fire flow, fire hydrant distance, fire access and hose reach only.
Yeah, so
So where the confusion was coming in this section was that originally you can see it says that
3 units.
new residential occupancies that we didn't review them. And that portion's still true. We don't necessarily review the building plans for a house. We're reviewing site locations. So that's why we ended up changing that. And that's where we were getting a lot of confusion. People were saying, well, you guys shouldn't be looking at this. Well, we're not necessarily looking at your house plans. We're not rejecting your permit. We will reject the site for your hydrant distance, fire flow, or that type of thing. So that's what really brought this all on.
here's an example. An example of one is you've got a home that they want to scrape it, put a new house on the site. They have no hydrant in their area within 600 feet, let alone some people don't have within 1,000 feet of the house. And so I chime in, depending on if it's design review, Mark's team will do it, or if it comes to me, I have to tell him, I said, I can't approve your plan, your proposal. Said, but there could potentially be code alternates that can allow for that. And I said, one such would be fire sprinklers. And then I go back and tell them about how per state statute, I can't force you to put fire sprinklers in your house and all this stuff. So then they come back like, well, why are you even reviewing my house in the first place? I'm like, I'm not reviewing your house, I'm reviewing your site. If you do certain things to your house, I'm allowed to use that as code alternate. It's confusing as heck to the public. And so I don't know how many times we've gone through this, but like that is imprinted in my head. That's like one of my copy paste answers that just pop out of my head is that wording. So we wanted to actually just put it out in front. And hopefully this would be, something that would be reviewed prior to anybody wanting to make any additions, because it catches people off guard all the time. Why should I, additions, what's the difference between my house with an extra 600 feet and I said, well, per the code, it's different, sorry. Anyway, that was the hope of this.
Just for clarifying.
Any other questions or?
So with the addition of this particular clause in the code, I'm assuming that there's a number of residential occupancies out there now that are not in compliance. Because before you were prescribing that you're just reviewing 3 or more units.
Anything that's out there it's still, their compliance hasn't changed whether they're in or out. This is literally just clarification of language. No matter what, the fire code still required me to look at those things. Therefore, we just wanted to put it out in front of us.
So the section is fire department plan review.
Correct.
Which comes to us in the building review. And normally they don't just look at duplexes or single family for fire code review other than this other stuff, right? Because there's other sections of the fire code for hydrants and access and all that. So they're trying to put it in one spot, so it's not in two spots.
Yeah, it's no change to our process.
Yeah.
And no change to any rules. It's literally just to try to clarify things up front for people that would review this prior to wanting to build or make any changes.
That makes sense.
Yes, it does.
We're hoping this avoids the back and forth of looking at two different sections, right? Saying, okay, here's what we look at on houses right here.
Right.
But yeah, once you hit any other residential occupancy like R4s and stuff, then we're looking at the building itself or inside, exiting and fire, all that stuff, alarms, sprinklers, exit signs. Okay. Next one is time limitation on application. In our permits, traditionally, at least on the building code side, we have you have 180 days when you apply, and then you can get 2 180-day extensions. But when your permit's issued, you can get 3 180-day extensions. So what we're seeing right now on submittals is people are taking a lot longer to get permits through. So we want to propose 3 extensions at that application time and just make them the same. 3 for application, 3 for issuance. And so fires now match, and we'll bring that change when we bring our building code for this, because we have it at 2 right now, but fire wants to match up with building, basically have the same. So you apply for a permit, you got 180 days to get it issued. If not, you get 3 extensions. So that's what that section is. And then the second one is when it's issued. Basically, same thing, they want to match up with us and say, once you have a permit issued, you can ask for 3 180-day extensions. So that matches up currently with what we have in the building code. Okay, so next one here is fire hydrant supply connections, and it looks like some new language in the exception. So it looks like independent connections with the municipal supply, looped mains from 2 points of connection. Then there's an exception here. You guys want to explain that?
So Veolia, their policy is not to allow a dead end main that feeds both a hydrant and a fire sprinkler system. They don't allow it. There are exceptions to that.
The fire code does allow.
The fire code does allow it. So we have this in there that if you're gonna have a dead end main and you have a fire hydrant and the fire sprinkler, there's a fire at the building, obviously the hydrant is what they're gonna be hooking up to. So this is just to guarantee that there's enough water in that dead end main to feed fire operations plus the fire sprinkler system at the same time. Because Veolia is not real, they don't allow this very often, we're just asking that it be approved by them prior to you submitting it. And then you're supposed to let it, that they're approved with it, that they're gonna let you do that, and that's pretty much it. We had one instance where we approved it because it met ours, and Veolia went in there and said, no, you can't do that, they turned it into a mess, so. We're just kind of trying to do things in the right order here, but that's pretty much it. There was a question too on whether they had to include on the fire sprinkler design, if they had to include the required hose allowance on top of the 500, and we said, yes, you have to be able to supply enough water for all of the water supply requirements.
Is there any precedence with this? Has this been done yet with Veolia?
Yes, we've had a couple instances where we've done it. We even had a variation of this with negotiations with Veolia where there was a multi-family complex, bunch of apartment buildings. And not only did we make them prove that they had the 500 for the hydrant, but because of all the domestic use, all the buildings was coming off that exact same main. We had them go back and prove that not only do this, but all domestic demand for all the buildings. reason, and then the reasoning behind that is building D. Those people will know the building's on fire, but A, B, and C may not. They're gonna be continuing to wash their clothes, do the dishes, take showers, all that kind of business. Lawn sprinklers might be running, that type of thing, things that will affect the effectiveness of the fire sprinkler system. So in that instance, we made them add all of that additional demand on that dead end main.
Do you also require the demand calculation for all of the fire suppression systems? in a
No,
chain
because
reaction?
we know, because we would hope that there'd only be one building on fire at a time.
Okay, good on that?
Yeah.
Okay, next one is the foam water suppression systems, right? We had recent amendments, I think, come through this board where we were not allowing the foam because of the
Because there was no listed fluorine-free foam, and now there are plenty.
and the dangers of the PFAS stuff. So now there's a UL listed fluorine-free foam out there that's available on the market. So that's pretty much amending this to say, yes, you can use that if it's the UL listed product, and then do proper disposal of the non-fluorine foam, which we have in several systems, right?
Other non-fluorine or fluorine-free options for every type of chemical fire that you'd be looking to put out? I'm thinking of like airplane hangars, jet fuel, lithium.
So lithium, foam doesn't work on lithium batteries.
Okay.
But like for any flammable liquid fire, the fluorine-free foam is, it's a tongue twister, is listed for that application.
But what about like jet fuel or something like that?
That's where we see it the most is in the
Yeah,
aircraft.
hangars will be able to use it.
Okay.
Yeah, I can tell you, it's unfortunate that the fluorine containing foam had to be taken away because it was actually very effective, but the fluorine-free foam is effective. It just takes more applications and more foam concentrate to do the same job. But again, it's way more environmentally friendly and firefighter friendly too. I don't know how many times I said with the old foam, this stuff tastes horrible. So
But I have a question. This is a question.
Yeah.
The foam system, when we change it from the triple F foam to this new foam, it causes bigger pipe size. So what if we have an existing building, we go in there and we do an inspection on there and we have to change it, the foam, then the pipes and hydraulics will work.
does it not work because of? Does it require?
The new
more-
foam it takes a different, the viscosity and everything, it's different than the A triple F we used to use. So what happens is when you change it out to the new foam, the existing pipe size isn't big enough.
So I guess would this be, are these more like, obviously in hangars?
Yes, that's about all we use it for.
Yeah.
Well. In hydraulic calculations, foam systems, you don't include viscosity.
Well, but when you calculate it in, it takes bigger pipe.
It shouldn't, because you don't include viscosity in a foam hydraulic calc. What it is gonna affect is this is not as effective, it takes more of it. So typically, the problem that you're gonna see in an existing hangar, let's say, is that your tank's too small.
Yes.
Is typically what the problem is gonna be, because
The
it's
foam
not,
solution
or
or
the
the
foam
foam
solution
concentrate.
is not as effective as the old stuff.
Right.
It just takes more of it to
Exactly.
do the same amount of
So
firefighting.
what do we do about it when we have to change it out?
Well, you'd probably end up having to change the tank, because you can't reuse the fluorine
Right.
foam, so you, at some point, you're gonna have to make the system
But
right.
I believe with these, I mean, we're
Tank.
we're doing more of an agreement type of upgrade. And not just coming right in and saying.
Yeah.
I'm gonna slap a sticker on your door and change it out, and open back up again. So it's been, everybody's being educated on it and nobody's being forced like today to do it. There's still plenty of systems out there that have that contain the fluorine foam concentrate in it. And so it's more of like on an upgrade agreement type of, schedule.
And Mark, isn't it pretty soon you can't even buy the 8 triple F, right?
You cannot now, as far as I know.
So if you get a trip system, whatever, you gotta change it out.
You're gonna have to change it out.
You gotta
The same is
change
true with
fan,
antifreeze, though.
piping and
It's-
everything.
it's-
It's a major cost.
Yeah, it's about the same as what you're running into with antifreeze. Same,
Yes.
same type of thing.
Right.
I can tell you that there's some good technology being put into the fire service now. Instead of foams where you lay a blanket of foam and it basically separates the fuel from the oxygen, it's called F500 is the name of the concentrate, and it's an encapsulator. So instead of you laying a blanket of foam and separating fuel from air, it actually grabs at the molecular level, grabs the flammable liquid molecule and basically suffocates it and keeps it from air. With lithium ion batteries, they showed they did a demo where they had basically like smaller, like cordless tool size batteries in a cage. They do them in a cage so they don't blow out and hit people in the eye or whatever. Anyway, it took like a fire engine's tank worth of water to cool the fire down. And it took, a 5-gallon pecan with encapsulator agent mixed with water, and it took a gallon of it and it stopped the battery fire. So new technology's on the way. People are trying to make better batteries, the works, but again, I mean, this stuff is going to be used obviously in like bulk operations like a airplane hangar, or if we did have like a jet fuel leak somewhere out of the airport grounds.
I did notice there's a typo. So where it says proper disposal shall be provided, it shouldn't be for the non-fluorine, it should be for the fluorine foam. So the word non and free should be taken out.
Yeah, I think that would read better.
Yeah, I think so too.
We'll say that again.
Instead of non-fluorine free,
Yeah.
just call it fluorine foam.
Fluorine foam and.
Okay.
Why not?
I mean, if
We
it
had another
it
tongue
works.
twister in there. I believe the same language comes up again.
Yeah, this is in multiple sections.
Yeah.
And it was like identical language.
It is, yeah. But the next one here is a single communication path monitoring system, which is a new section. You want to explain that one?
So this is for IP. Single communication path IP monitoring for fire alarm. The problem we run into is that NFPA 72 requires battery backup. For all the communication path stuff, so it becomes almost an impossible task to try to figure out required batteries for IP equipment. For the router, for the IP provider, I mean, literally the whole chain, all the way to the central station monitoring company. So we've just gotten to the point where, and it doesn't leave a backup. So if your internet goes down or anything like that, there's no backup for single path. So based on that, we're just not gonna allow single path at this point. Not that we have that many people asking for it. I think I can only think of off the top of my head 2 in the last 5 or 6 years I've been here.
It's very rare.
It's pretty rare and it doesn't meet. And in my own opinion, is it doesn't meet the redundancy that's required by NFPA 72 by single path. So I don't know honestly how this ever got put in. But single path has some problems. And I was looking before I put this in there, I was searching for how other jurisdictions or just how NFPA in general is dealing with it. And I really couldn't come up with anything that made any sense. A lot of people just don't use it.
I'd say not only like just the batteries, but having to protect every piece, every inch of IP equipment. Like to the intent of NFPA. Protecting fire alarm panels for all that matters, right? So like, it's almost impossible, like Mark said, to do that. And if you were to try to do that, you'd be spending a ton more money. Versus, let's just do what the intent of NFPA is to have two paths, have some redundancy on it.
But we do leave it open-ended too, to where if they can reasonably assure that
Yeah.
there's adequate backup, we'll be willing to take a look at it.
Okay, here's another foam section and it is specific to the aircraft hangar, so it's the same language. That I guess we'll fix this, right? Say
Yeah.
fluorine foam being replaced.
Yeah.
Okay, same here, another one here, same thing. Okay, so now we're jumping into the wildland urban interface code section of the fire code. And like there's changes here on the, what we used to call wildfire safety and mitigation plan. We're getting rid of mitigation, it's wildfire safety plan. And then there's a new statement here about putting it in the CCNRs. That's at the subdivision level.
Pretty much so that in hopes that it lives in perpetuity, doesn't get lost. There's some places that, I've had to go back and ask them for their wildfire safety plan, like, well, we don't know where that is. Like, it could be like a new board, a new HOA board. It's like, well, where would I find that much? Well, not on my server. You guys are supposed to have kept it somewhere and it never got handed down. So trying to just tie it to some form of legal documentation, so at least it should be found. Kind of like tying a hubcap to the restroom key at a gas station. That's pretty much the effort with this one.
Almost feel like though it should say will be incorporated into the CCRs if a CCR is established for the development, because there's a number of developments that are established without CCRs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I guess we could like,
Misleading, like you have to establish a
Yeah.
CCNR now
yeah, we
in
can
order
do
to incorporate it.
in parentheses, if established.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, totally.
Yeah, then that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, and this further goes into the plan. Looks like we got the wrong
Oh, one
color.
other comment too.
Yeah.
Is you may want to actually spell out what CCNR means, because I don't think it's in the acronym table of the code.
Okay. Yep. Good comment. So this is the content of the plan. It's like just rewording of this a little bit, kind of says the same thing. And
This
then it-
reads out more like how you read into the code when it speaks to ignition resistant construction versus structure ignition and fire resistance factors. Though that terminology is not even stated in the movie code. So it's basically clarification. And then
an audit process.
and then reminding people there is an audit process that is supposed to occur. That just falls by the wayside. And then I'm not out there checking everybody and being like, hey, let's take an audit of your wildfire safety plan. It wasn't an approved plan. It's more of the allowance of, if you're gonna make big changes to your development, we need to do an audit to make sure that it still applies to your development, so.
And then into the vegetation management section. It's like we added a new item here. Planner process to monitor the report, implementation of the vegetation management actions. And then looks like the person preparing this plan have some relevant wildfire mitigation experience.
Yeah, we pretty much went through the wildfire mitigation specialist qualifications and felt that those were applicable for what we need in this position, in somebody that is going to prepare this plan for a subdivision. So basically, we use that to vet out who can actually write these plans. There's not too many people around town that do that right now.
I think that's one of the things that floats in the back of my mind as we go through each of these changes and the additions is what personnel is that adding to the design and development team's roster in order to achieve each of these things? In many cases, it doesn't add anyone, but in some cases, like wildland mitigation plan generator becomes another specialty that somebody probably has to bring on board to their development team.
Yes, and again, obviously only in wildland urban interface.
Right.
And it's extremely important though, because I don't have the resources or education to even write these plans. And I haven't come across any developers that have that either, even as much as they would want. And I even checked with landscape architect companies, nobody has any of these people. But they're very integral in keeping our urban interface to pretty much help us stay consistent with our plans across. Because it's a the wildfire mitigation specialist certification is general across the board, across the nation. So that was why when we looked at this, we wanted to put a little more specification on wildfire mitigation experience versus somebody like one person that I know that does them here. He's an ecologist, but he's been trained up to that level.
Yeah.
Versus if it was just an ecologist, okay, like, well, what's your bias, right? Like, what animal are we trying to save here versus I just want to protect houses, I want to protect the town kind of thing. So
It reminds me, and I'll get off of this train of thought, but it reminds me a little bit of what we went through as a community decades ago when we established the SWOOPS plan. So the plan designer and the plan administrator, and I mean,
For erosion.
I can't tell you how many of us had both of those and kept going to classes. And
yeah,
I think I wrote one or two in my entire, 20 years of keeping that lasted. Certification. But
You almost
I mean,
feel more of a danger to yourself after a while.
exactly. So I guess that's, as I'm looking at this, your explanation is perfect.
okay.
That helps with an understanding of it.
And definitely not trying to try not to add cost, but I believe this is a position where this can actually help reduce the liability of developer of the city. I mean, of pretty much everybody involved, either living there, building it, developing it, or governing.
And quite frankly, it might help control insurance rates in the wildland urban interface.
Yeah.
So the next one is, I don't know if you remember when we first did the WUI areas, we had 2 classification areas, right? Originally, and then we updated it, we went to 3. And now it looks like we're going back to 2.
So here's what we were finding is that 3, everybody was wanting to build their house to the 3 because it was slightly. I actually don't know, I would say not slightly less, it was significantly less fire protection for the homes. And what was occurring is there was the allowance of, okay, what will, like in the IR2, not IR1 portions, but in the IR2 zones, the external homes were being built basically as a fire break at ignition resistant 2 class, and then the internals were being allowed to be built to IR3. Well, embers don't just stop at the outside homes. And then so basically you're like building these really hardened homes and then build a home out of pallets, put a Class A roof on it and call it IR3. I mean, so it didn't make any sense. It wasn't something that we should leave hanging out there for somebody to think they can get when they don't understand the potential. So we just figured it was right to just eliminate that. If you live in the IR2 zone, build your house to the IR2 specs, the way the code says. Same thing, IR1, you build to the specs, so we wanted to just eliminate confusion. It was a rarity if it was being allowed. And we wanted to also take out any, I guess, optics of being arbitrary with how we apply the code.
And I know it was adding confusion to our building plan reviewers because they were used to the two methods before, and then when we introduced this third one, it was just. Now what's this?
And then it was like, why this house? Why not this house?
Yeah.
And then other times would be phase one. Everything on the exterior is IR2, next thing you know. Phase two's another mile out, and they're like, hey, well, I could actually build my house to IR3. I'm like, oh, you were unfortunately the edge of phase one. So this is to eliminate confusion, and I personally believe that this eliminates danger to people that live in these areas.
So there's a lot of getting rid of the hyphen on non-combustible in this document, so that's everywhere in here. So this is another definition, right? Open burning. And special expert. Looks like added into the WUI code, right?
Correct.
If there's anything to highlight there or.
So is it saying that open burning with combustible materials prohibited?
We'll get to those sections. There's some other sections, I think, in there. This is just defining what open
What it
burning
is.
is.
And it's open burning, like the very first sentence really narrows down what or basically. It speaks to it's not being emitted through a stack or a chimney, that we require spark arresters and everything. It's literally fire pits. We have people like, well, it's a recreational fire, it's not open burning, but you're in the wildland, everybody interface, burning solid fuel, emitting embers. Common sense says that's not safe. Code says it's not allowed, but wasn't. It wasn't explained in detail enough.
Okay.
So it's more of eliminating confusion and or expectations, or defining expectations up front a little better than the code before.
So there are a lot of those open burning fire pits that do have a chimney stack on them.
Yeah.
Do those qualify or not?
Those have a chimney stack and they have to have a spark arrestor, and all of them have to be approved by the fire code official before they can be installed. But it's defined in the WUI code, it is defined the required parts of. If you want to build a fireplace, whatever the parts are listed.
So here's just altering the IR2 section. That do not include slope terrain. And then getting rid of that IR3 where it's mentioned, so we deleted that.
What significance does not include slope terrain provide?
So IR2 allows for, it's not much, but it allows for like less protection of soffits. If I remember right, wasn't it something like that? Like, and so what the slope terrain actually allows for embers to blow up into soffits. IR2 is expecting, like if it was to be an ember storm coming in, to be horizontal and or coming down at it, but the IR1 is what really hillside and everything like that. Basically, hillside makes you build to the IR1 spec versus IR2 spec, and it's just because of what can happen in a fire event on slope terrain.
So slope terrain defined anywhere?
Well, we have GIS maps for our hillside areas and they map these areas on the GIS layer.
So why doesn't it reference that instead of just saying slope terrain?
So there is something in the code, and I can't remember what section it's in, that speaks to percent grade when it comes to, I believe, like the protection of underfloor areas. And I believe that's what IR1 requires, protection of underfloor areas. IR2 does not. That's one of the two exceptions for IR2. I'll dig through here and see if I can find something.
Just want to make sure that the interpretation is consistent across the code on what a slope grade
Yeah,
is.
and it's mapped for our reviewers, right? You've got it mapped on GIS, so when a lot comes in, we look at GIS and it'll say, okay. It's in this area. So again, getting rid of class 3 here. Non-combustible again. A lot of non-combustible corrections here. So here's vents. So there's some new exception added for vents in the WUI area, which this has been a big deal with our mechanical and plumbing sections, right? So there's new exceptions for the clothes dryer and plumbing vents exempt from the mesh covering requirement, the general requirement. Appliance vents that are prohibited by the manufacturer to be covered by mesh. Non-combustible exhaust vents with louvers, 1/4-inch wire mesh screens are provided instead of the 1/8 inch. And then where no acceptable alternative exists for air intake vents. I think this will help our mechanical plumbing section where, you know, those vents come with the equipment and have to be plastic vents, right? Or, you know, can't swap them out for non-combustible.
I think, Jason, that there's always a market industry solution that can substitute the plastic for non-combustible vent structures and whatnot. I mean, we deal with it in multifamily all the time that you move away from the plastic combustibles and you go to a little more durable for a host of reasons, maintenance being one. And so, and I appreciate the latitude here, but I think as we see the industry transition into more Firewise products, we're able to start to tailor some of this. We'll be revisiting this in the future.
It could be,
Yeah.
right, as technology manufacturers change the product.
Yeah.
Yeah. And same thing here on plumbing. So here's the ignition 3 resistant section just being deleted since we're getting rid of it. This section added on fences. I guess we've had a bunch of questions on
And
fences.
there's never been any clear definition on what's allowed for fencing in WUI, so this just clarifies it. I get that question every week from plan reviewers reviewing houses, and this guy wants to build a fence, what do I allow him to build it out of? So this is just to clarify that, to make it clear what they can do for fencing.
And if I'm right, this is brought in from the IWIC.
I believe that's correct. Yeah.
It was just for some reason it was not in our WUI code, but we applied international WUI code. We just didn't have this in the Boise City code, and it generated quite a bit of confusion. So we wanted it in writing, right in front of people.
So it's 8 feet, if you're within 8 feet, non-combustible. If you're past 8 feet, then you can do non-combustible. So
Yeah, so basically it's like you're putting metal gates, you know, and metal fence out to 8 feet. If you're wanting something to come right after the home.
Okay,
Tyler, I was gonna let you know that there's two parts in the code that speak to slope surface greater than 10%, then that kicks in requirements for protection of underfloor areas. So it's 2 places consistent, it's slope greater than 10% and nothing. I haven't found any other inconsistency with the 10% grade.
Okay, so this section's about fuel modifications, looks like added was per the requirements in the wildfire safety plan. Or other site-specific analysis based on local conditions.
Which can either be more restrictive or less restrictive, depending on what's going on next to a certain development. If a development is, surrounded by undeveloped land, it's the most stringent. That for some reason, there's another development that comes in that butts right up, we can basically allow for changes, potential changes in the wildfire safety plan.
Okay, and then we got the trees section. There's a new exception here for shorter stature trees to be pruned to remove all limbs located above the ground to 1/3 of the tree crown height. So example, 9-foot tree shall be limbed up 3 feet from the ground.
Because people were figuring they were turning their trees into Charlie Brown Christmas trees after a while, so we're like, no. Within reason, we're good.
And so here's your outdoor.
Some trees, they're like weeping. And the limbs actually go to the ground, even though they're pruned up to 1/3. Does that mean that you can't allow weeping trees to touch the ground? They have to be pruned like the Japanese maple, for instance, right? That those always just go straight to the ground.
Right. It's a good question, because we never,
I mean, it does,
I don't know if the Japanese maples are allowed. They most likely would be allowed in these subdivisions,
so
so,
charging statement is any of them within 10 feet of the structure, right?
so as long as you're away. It's just, once you start getting them that 10-foot, it becomes very restrictive with like ground cover and tree, like the actual type of vegetation, so it doesn't prohibit them from having a weeping tree. It's just the weeping tree can't be inside the 10 feet unless they limit that.
I see.
And really what it is you don't want to fire, amber landing, bottom of the tree, comes a crown fire up in the eaves, and then here we go kind of thing, so.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up, is because you can limb up the stump of the tree, but they could still be weeping.
Correct. Yeah,
I think, yeah, the exception was for these shorter trees, because otherwise it was limited up 6 feet, right? You're within 10 feet.
yes.
Okay, so here's a section talking about IR1, right, and the outdoor fires. Not less than 30 feet from any combustible material. Should have openings protected with approved spark arrestor, screen or door, or otherwise approved by the code official. I think that was your question
Yep.
earlier.
And that's in the code already. It's just kind of dotted this pieces it together here. Then it should speak in the exception to propane or natural gas, then you can go down to 15 feet.
So we went from 2 exceptions to 1, right? Looks like.
Yeah, and we took out, it used to just say propane fired portable outdoor fireplaces. People are like, well, what about my permanently installed? We go, well, to me, that's better. So I'll allow it. Problem is, it was always having to have a special approval from me to do so versus we wanted to be like, it's easier to read, makes more sense. And plus it never listed natural gas. That didn't make sense either, so.
Okay.
Better language governing the same thing.
And that's 15 feet.
Yeah, because of no potential for sparks.
Okay.
And that does not mean natural gas started wood burning fires. I have had that one. That's. No.
Okay, so here's a section on area separation, and I think this.
I'm sorry, can we go back just a little bit?
Yep.
Under the exceptions for the propane fired, natural gas fired outdoor fireplace.
Mhm.
So is this saying that I can't have one within 15 feet.
Yeah, it cannot be less than 15 feet away from combustible construction or vegetation.
In an IR1.
In an IR1.
Yes,
He'll say,
that's it.
And so you can't have a gas grill.
You have, no, you can't have an outdoor fireplace.
Fireplace.
That's run off of propane or natural gas.
Correct.
Within 15 feet.
Yeah, gas grills being one enclosable, smaller flame heights versus.
Yeah.
You get some natural gas or propane outdoor fireplaces. That if you're pyro, like some of
Yeah,
us in
so-
the fire department, you have a big fire out there.
Section 2 that's X'd out included portable outdoor fireplaces, not propane, but that went away with the new exception.
Thanks for the clarification.
okay, so this one is out of appendix B. Looks like area separation, adding an exception, right? This is single family.
Yeah, we found that we were approving these anyway. So we just put it in code so they didn't have to apply for an AMM all the time. So this basically applies to where we run into this as additions. So if you have a house that we're looking at, they don't have adequate fire flow or any of that business. They always have the alternate to sprinkle the house if they wish. Or we allow them to separate off the addition from the existing house. Well, in appendix B, you do that with a firewall and it's not allowed to have any openings. Well, that doesn't make any sense for a house. So we've been allowing this anyway. So what we do is we eliminate that section when it comes to additions and allow them just to use the regular separation wall, which is a fire barrier. You're allowed to have openings in it as long as the door is rated, that type of thing. Nobody wants a garage that you have to go outside the house and go around to. So, and like I say, we were approving this anyway, so we're just making it official. So now they don't have to ask for special permission.
Okay, so now we're down to the last section, which has quite a bit, right? It's a whole new chapter added. Fire code pertaining to the storage, manufacturing and uses of the lithium metal and lithium ion batteries. This is kind of a big issue. It's been coming up a lot lately, not only here, but statewide. There's been a lot of fires charging the things, whether it's cars, e-bikes, scooters, power tools, right?
You name it, even vape pens, phones.
So,
Yeah.
and the state is trying to look at this too right now. I just went to a state meeting 2 days ago, even on the building code. They're looking at it at the fire code side and the building code side. The 2024 codes includes a lot of these sections basically to try to help protect. these
Most of
better.
this language is straight from the 2024 fire code. It's the first code that actually addresses.
And the state building code boards basically said they're gonna skip the 21 code and go straight to the 24 code now. So they're gonna be looking at that in the next year to adopt. Probably the next
Is
year.
that going through IDOC?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
Yeah.
a version of this, a very close version of this is what they're looking to do a temporary adoption of.
Yeah, it looks to me like they're gonna do temporary rules in the building code. Have the governor sign them as temporary, get them in place quicker. While they go through the long process of adopting the 24 code.
Okay.
And the state fire marshal is gonna do the same thing, right? With
Yeah.
adding these types of provisions out of the 24 fire code just for this topic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We still straddle that unique fence post, if you will, or fence in at the state through DOPL and the governor's CBR zero-based regulation move, you know, so I'm excited to hear that.
Hopefully they look at this as, it's not an added regulation, it's just a regulation that's coming in a year.
Yeah.
Then we've already got it.
Or
Kinda.
a year or two.
Yeah. No, this is great.
Yeah, and I would say it's consistent with, I've worked in a jurisdiction that have adopted a 21 code, but they've adopted this language they've amended
Into the 21
code
Yeah.
because of battery manufacturing facilities in that jurisdiction.
There we go. So there's definitions added, you know, these are the e-bikes, the scooters. And we've got the EV parking spaces and then energy storage systems. And it talks about getting an operational permit when you're 15 cubic feet.
Yeah.
Or greater, is that right?
Yeah.
Or more than 15 cubic feet of batteries. So you get your operational permit, and then you've got storage. There's some requirements for storage, but it outlines some exceptions, right, first.
On this operational permit piece. Of 15 cubic feet, how does that translate to like an EV? How many cubic feet of battery in an EV?
I had the same thought.
I don't my conversion tables.
All right,
They
right.
On the cubic feet.
It's a great question, because I had the same thought on 50 cubic feet.
Very much.
No, it's not. I mean, and
Is it like 3 e-bikes? Is it 1 EV car or 2 or?
Well, I don't know that it is for the vehicles themselves as it would be for
it's just for,
retail.
it's for the storage.
Yeah, or
Battery
like
storage.
Home Depot where they have all their cordless batteries stored in their stock room or whatever the case may be. Once they exceed 15 cubic feet, that's where the operational permit would kick in. It's not gonna kick in if you have a Tesla. Even though a Tesla battery may very well be over 15 cubic feet, but that's gonna be covered under a EV, electrical vehicle.
I don't know if that's very clear here.
Well, yeah, I would agree. But like I say, it's straight out of the 24. I mean, we could probably look at changing it, but I didn't mess with the 24 code a whole lot. I figured better to get used to it.
And my first reaction reading it was, oh, how many cubic feet of battery are in my
Mhm.
car?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it definitely is, it's definitely not.
Yeah, I don't know why
We've
they-
had,
50 cubic feet is unit measure of this.
here's another example, like you have a car, you charge it, is that counted as energy storage? It's not, it's like, it's strictly counted as an EV. Like when we talk about energy storage systems in like a residential garage, it is the battery wall.
Yeah, Tesla
Right.
batteries from.
Or if they have a battery wall on wheels, it's the battery wall on wheels, but it's not the car.
We are definitely
That came
starting
up.
to see more batteries with our solar permits lately. People are really starting to have those.
Oh,
yeah. Again, even when it says that an operational permit needs to be, basically needs to be there, it's always at the discretion of the fire code official. An operational permit is required. Because one of the issues is, I don't have enough people to actually govern all the operational permits in the fire code. So it's like, it always states that the fire code official has the authority to require. But that's it, like, this would be, we'll see first how many people, if we think, oh my, this is probably the one permit we need, we'll eliminate all the other permits for all that matters. But, at first, I'm not creating anything as of this point. And even if it is, it's super cheap.
So there's a whole bunch of exceptions here to the storage requirements. If you meet these exceptions and you don't have to meet those provisions, right?
Which will help the M occupancies.
So here again is the permit, 15 cubic feet's in there again. And then it talks about a fire safety plan.
And it does speak to other than batteries listed in the exceptions section that was above.
For the permits.
So storage. We got limited indoor storage in containers. If it meets the following. Open top. Non-combustible, approved for battery collection. Individual containers should not exceed a capacity of 7.5 cubic feet. Second group of containers separated by not less than 3 feet of open space or 10 feet of space if there's combustible materials. Containers should be located not less than 5 feet from exits or exit doors.
Oftentimes with that, where you'll see that applied most is at battery recyclers. They're very unregulated and pretty lax when it comes to, we've gone to a couple of recycling places, there was some kid with a tape gun, taping batteries and tucking them in that box. You look in the box, you're like, that's a lot of batteries in there. Did you verify they all have 0 energy in them? Like, we don't test for that. It's just trying to keep them taping and throwing in there. Like, okay, apparently we're gonna keep an eye on your business. That we like, so before having this, we basically told the company, you need to take this, you need to isolate it, you need to get outside of your building. You need to lock it up if you can, like, here's your dangers, and they're, oh, we didn't even know. So that's where a lot of this, we're gonna see where this gets enforced.
Okay, and it starts into indoor storage areas. So it's like technical opinion and report. For indoor storage, you need a report to analyze it. Or- It gets into what's required for that report. Flammable gases, thermal runaway event occurs, basis for automatic sprinkler design. And then construction, looks like indoor storage, we need 2-hour rated rooms, is that correct? So fire barriers, 2-hour, according to the building code. And there's some exceptions. Where battery storage is contained in one or more approved prefabricated portable structures providing a complete 2-hour rating. Then you don't need the fire rated room. It's in the container, right? Prefabricated. Where battery storage is limited to new batteries and packaging that's been demonstrated. Approved by the fire code official that's sufficient to isolate the fire in the packaging to the package interior, then you don't need it. So what's that? They're just wrapping it in certain things and.
Basically ignition, like non-combustible materials that could. And obviously, we're gonna be looking at what's the amount of batteries in there. If it's nothing that. It's gonna escape that packaging, we're not gonna worry about it.
Okay.
If anything, the stuff we worry about is the large scale storage.
Fire protection systems protected by sprinklers. Does say or an approved alternative, I don't know if there is one.
I don't think there is one at this time.
I can tell you this, the last thing you want to do is put the fire out and let it keep off gassing. Because it just puts, it's off gassing flammable gas, and it's just waiting for another ignition source. And then it'll create an explosion, and there's been one of the first major incidents, it was at an energy storage facility in Arizona. Basically one of those Connex containers that had batteries for the power company. And same starts off gassing and the fire department gets called. There's a white cloud of gas on the desert floor. They open the door, they check in there. They just go to shut the door, and the captain that was there saw like just a flicker real quick, and basically he said, "What?" It's on the radio, it says "what?" And then they got blown 100 feet out into the desert through a fence. Their clothes got, their turnouts got ripped off of them. Their air tanks were blown in half, and they all survived, which is amazing. But it was like, again, so people think, well, we don't want to put water on batteries. Like the batteries are done. We don't even care. Like, so if somebody were to come to me with an approved, like with some sort of alternative fire suppression system, we would definitely take into account, well, what does that do to the flammable gas as well, kind of thing. So we're hoping that at some point this encapsulating agent, half the fire service thinks that's the newest technology that's gonna propel us into the future, and the other half is calling, because I believe their buddies are probably in the every phone business, I guess, so. But anyway, that's when it comes to suppression, it's still all water right now. It just holds it in check for us to try and figure out what we're gonna do next when we get there.
I didn't see any mention of temperature controls for storage of the lithium ion batteries. So if you stuff them in a Connex box, like you just said,
Out in the
and it
desert,
cooks in the sun,
out in the desert, and it's out there.
but I don't see that anywhere in here, where it talks about the storage, like
Because that's-
climate controlled environment.
Yeah, that has not been proven to be a contributing factor to thermal runaway for the batteries. It's actually been a fault in the system or damage to the cells.
So you could store any lithium ion battery in a 250-degree Connex that's baking in the sun and it's compromise it.
It has to have fire sprinklers over it. That's it. That's what combats it, is it's got fire sprinklers in it.
It's interesting.
Yeah. That's why you put it on the desert. Way far away from everybody.
Okay, so fire alarm system, indoor, we're talking again, indoor storage areas. And we're talking about fire detection systems shall use air aspirating smoke detection and radiant energy sensing fire detection. Got some explosion control. Reduced requirements for storage of partially charged batteries. A demonstrated state of charge not exceeding 30%. Then you don't have to meet those requirements.
Yeah, then it's lessened because of the lessened amount of energy potential. Kind of like you can't have 20-pound propane cylinders on a balcony, but you can have a 1-pounder.
And you got an outdoor storage section.
This speaks to, because before outdoor storage really was like, you could just go store it out in bins out there and just leave it out there. Now this requires, it requires weather protection. And I believe it also requires, suppression. Even for outdoor storage.
This says shall comply with one of the following. Not less than 20 feet from any building or lot line, public street, public alley. You can get down to 3 feet, but you have to build a 2-hour wall, looks like, right? Isolate it from the.
It's like square footage.
I generally don't like the reduced requirements for storage on partially charged batteries section.
The one up here,
Yeah,
30%.
demonstrated by whom? And what, just because you ran a battery dead, you think it's less than 30%? And you go put it in the wrong storage environment?
Yeah, that seems like a hard one to regulate.
Very.
Most manufacturers, when they ship them, they're not at full charge. And that's basically what that's
for.
Yeah,
Yeah, but what out post use is what I was concerned about this.
but I don't know that there'd be any way to be able to regulate it post use. It's basically when you're in storage, if the manufacturer's shipping them at a lower capacity, then they would meet a lot of the exceptions, or meet this exception anyway. Because when you buy any tool, it always says you have to charge it first. I mean, it'll work for a little while, but normally they're at a reduced charge.
Yeah, that's the only way I could see this applies, right? Because
That's the
after
only
that,
way.
it's like, who knows what they're charging?
Right.
And why would you charge it
Yeah,
30%,
Your
right?
state of charge is gonna be all over the board. once you start using-
Ambiguity.
Yeah, I know, that's what it must be, is when they deliver it first, right? They do charge it to 30% only or something from the manufacturer.
Yep.
But yeah, it's a interesting one. So let's see here. And then, well, the third one here is you can get down to 3 feet if you're an approved container, right? Prefabricated 2-hour container. The general rule, 20 feet away. Get down to 3 feet with 2-hour wall or a 2-hour container. This is outdoor storage. Height of battery storage not to exceed 10 feet. And then multiple battery storage areas shall be separated from each other by not less than 10 feet of open space.
It basically listed it out like hazardous materials, like they defined what your control areas are for batteries.
Fire detection. Need your alarm system.
Detection, not suppression.
That's detection, just out in the open. Then there's a section here on your micro mobility devices. So this is those e-bikes, right? Scooters.
E-bikes, scooters, skateboards, even like someday in my near future, like a hover round or something.
So it does have a couple exceptions here. Storage, repair, charging, and residential occupancies, provided such devices are provided for personal use by its owner. Charging of a single powered mobility device in any occupancy by its owner. They can't use a residential occupancy as a business for charging mobility devices as part of a rental or sales service.
So that's probably not helped a lot of people that work for Lime.
I was just gonna say, what does Lime do?
I was always
That's
worried
exactly
about
what
when are we
they do.
gonna come to somebody's house that's the Lime people, they're like, they've torched their entire house for this company, so yeah, that's what gets rid of. Plus, I believe a decent amount of this, I'm almost positive, was written due to everything that's happened in New York over the past few years. This happens everywhere, they either have the actual store that does the scooter repair underneath the apartment building, and I don't know how many apartment buildings have been burnt up by the store below. And people have been killed, so anyway, this at least helps. I like the two exceptions. It says like you can do one powered mobility device, even though that's enough to blow the door and window out of your apartment, but
Must be charged in accordance with their listing and manufacturer's instructions, right? And that's one of the biggest issues on some of these fires is where they're buying new chargers
yes.
off Amazon that don't match the manufacturer's equipment.
So I think
And
this,
charging these
yeah.
things, right?
I think this ends up putting some code compliance requirements onto the public. So if you do somehow burn your apartment building down and our fire investigators are good enough, we could probably find that it was not a listed charger. The potential for you to be the one, probably not the apartment owner, is now greater. So to combat this, we tried like crazy to do a lot of public education, especially in apartment complexes, to let everybody know the dangers of it, how to be responsible owners. We don't try to deter them from owning, we just try to show them how responsible ownership is. Give them the whole like don't do Amazon's good for certain things, not everything kind of speech. And then that's as far as we can get. But I like these, at least it shows like you can show somebody, listen, you are the one personally on the hook if you guys do something. If you guys are responsible owners. And this is again straight out of the fire code.
So this is battery charging areas. Permitted to charge in a room that complies with all the following. Listed devices utilizing listed charging equipment. Sufficient electrical receptacles without extension cords, power strips.
Number 2 burnt a family out of a trailer like 3 months ago with charging a phone.
Storage of combustible materials, hazardous materials. Do not obstruct means of egress. not stacked or charged in an enclosed cabinet unless the cabinet specifically designed and approved for that. Minimum distance of 18 inches be maintained between removable storage battery during charging operations, unless each battery is isolated from the neighboring batteries in an approved fire resistant material. So 18-inch clearance between them. 18-inch between the locations of the batteries of each powered micromobility device during charging. Indoor room or area protected by a fire alarm system.
Fire alarm in the garage.
Well, this isn't residential, right?
This is
Oh, this is commercial.
Yeah.
And when you look at like those distance requirements, it's because of. These are, if this was a car, it'd be a lot more, but it's because of the actual,
I guess it-
you've seen that
I
happen.
guess it could pertain to residential multifamily.
It would,
Yeah.
yeah, I would say it for them. And so we already have a few places downtown that have specific area, specific rooms for these. And they're protected not only by fire alarm systems, but by a fire sprinkler system as well. But the distance is because of the size of the batteries that you should see on these. And the amount of, I guess, the length of the jet flame that comes off of them when they do go into thermal runaway. So that's why you'll see some distance requirements for separation.
Is there a fire alarm requirement in a podium style apartment complex garage?
Should be already,
Mhm,
For the parking garage?
mhm,
because it's counted.
mhm.
If podium is counted, the entire building is, even though it's separated, the entire building is still counted the same when it comes to
Fire
suppression and detection.
Talks about fire safety plan.
Again, we'll see these at apartment buildings.
And there's some exceptions, fire safety plan not required. For these items, right? It's like small stuff.
Yeah.
Like, typo right there. Units, sleeping units. We're still talking about safety plan, evacuation plan. And any exceptions? And then it gets into the fire sprinkler requirement. Occupancy. We got B occupancy labs, research and development of the batteries, F1 manufacturing. They're manufacturing the batteries, sprinklers. F1 used to manufacture vehicles or energy storage systems or equipment containing the batteries. And then in an M, I think it goes back to that storage section, right, for the M. Or retail.
Retail,
Yeah. And then the storage, they do have a 500 square feet threshold, looks like, right? So for S1 storage occupancy warehouse type. And then a repair garage looks like has the 500 square feet threshold too. For sprinklers. It's this section here.
This is basically technical, having, instead of it, it's not just some run of the mill fire suppression system, so we're actually requiring technical oversight on the design. That's what I got out of this from the code.
Yeah, there's no approved design criteria for lithium batteries. There just isn't one. There hasn't been enough research done to come up with one. So this is kind of a catch-all in the meantime. It's like, prove to us that what you're gonna do is gonna do what you say it's gonna do. Because there's no, I mean, UL and everybody are in the process of trying to come up with design criteria on how to put them out. But there, nothing exists as of now.
So we're gonna be relying on FPEs to give us something that's stamped and approved.
Is Factory Mutual, are they running testing then?
As far as I know, I don't know about Factory Mutual, I know UL is.
UL's running a ton. They've got a lot of.
I would assume Factory Mutual is too, because I mean, this is the hot topic. Batteries.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's trying to figure out how to cover them. I watched a YouTube video, it's a manufacturing place, and they have a table. And they were doing something, I didn't really go into great detail, and the guy's working on the battery, and it goes into thermal one ring, so they have a security camera. And the table he's working on sits over basically a swimming pool. The thing catches on fire, the guy goes over, hits this button, and the thing opens up and it just drops it in the swimming pool.
Which is what that Korean company wished they had.
Yeah.
Burnt the whole place down.
You know,
People got killed in it, and it was, they were working on small scale battery on a bench. And it went in a thermal runaway, and sure enough, off gas is enough where then you got this big cloud of flammable gas, lights that off, lights everything else off. I can't remember how many people it killed in there.
23.
Yeah,
I was just reading about it, I just got the NFPA journal right before I got here.
and burnt like an entire floor out of a factory.
Yeah.
So even the small ones, even the small ones can start something big, so.
So how do you tell a fire sprinkler designer to follow a standard that hasn't been set yet?
That's why it has to be done by FPE. They're gonna have to try to figure it out. It's not gonna be simple.
So you basically can't design a system right now.
Well, I wouldn't say can't, to be able to design something with 100% reliability. Probably not. But they're gonna take their best stab at it and give us the reason as to why they think what they're gonna do should work. And we would either agree or disagree with them.
If the testing is ongoing at testing laboratories right now, and you're telling them to follow their design based on what those tests are producing. They're currently not produced.
Well, I mean, there's new stuff coming out almost weekly.
It's just the fact that it's not listed yet.
Yeah,
There's
right.
no,
That's the point I'm making, is you're telling a designer to design to something that hasn't been done yet.
We do that often where we meet the intent of the code, where it's not just a run of the mill fire suppression system. Oftentimes we'll have FPEs help us with AMMs, right? That it's not directly out of the code, but for this operation at this specific building, this design appears to have met the intent of the code. So they are gonna have to reference like UL's testing. I mean, they shouldn't be trying to do this all by themselves. Hopefully they at least Google like we Google. But
But if none of the testing has been published, they
it's
can't.
published.
Oh,
yeah, like I say, there's
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
coming out weekly and there's new technologies. I mean, there's people that are trying to use, I've seen, it's for Tesla. Like, if it's on the site, they just cover the whole thing. So there's new technologies and that coming out. I say this is the hot topic, so it changes from month to month.
Yeah, there's just not.
In parking structures, it used to be ordinary group 1, now they make it a group 2, which is 33% more water now in a parking garage than we were a couple of years ago.
Is that?
That's not just because of battery, that's because of
No,
plastic.
That's just because of, that's just because of what cars are made of now.
Everything's plastic.
Yeah, and then on top of that, like with our EV parking, it's over the EV charging areas, it's extra hazard even higher than those portions.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I think one concern I do have is that it's evolving. And it's the technology is changing rapidly, the testing is happening as we're speaking. And so if you submit a permit, a building permit to build a structure like this, and then the technology changes after the deferred submittal is submitted. You have your building permit, you're going to build the structure. You submit a deferred submittal for an automatic fire protection system. Down the road, it could have serious implications on changes that would then need to happen to your building. Because the technology itself has changed.
Well, I mean, we could actually be doing that now with the fact that ordinary housing one is a parking garage, enclosed parking garage. And now we have this ongoing issue with lithium ion batteries, but we're not going retroactive back and making people change. And if people, we haven't done it where anything that's already been approved, we haven't gone back and made any changes. It's literally as per what's at application time. So we're not springing anything new on people, and we're not going retroactive with anything. I would love to, if it was free for everybody to go retroactively, but it's not. Somebody would pay the cost, so I don't see it. We're not gonna treat it any differently than we treat things now. There's not gonna be any surprise at the end.
And I think in the end, if technology ever got to the place where it was significantly better, or was a large leap in effectiveness, you'd see that in chapter 11 for existing building codes, where it would be required to either be implemented or
Yeah, you could end up in a situation here where the timing becomes an issue, because when you submit a building permit, and you get that building permit, and you start construction on that building. You can still submit your deferred submittal for your fire protection system down the road.
Right.
And so at what point in time are you saying we're locking in the technology for whatever system this is gonna be? Is it at the deferred submittal down the road, or is it at the building permit initially?
Well, it would probably be, well, it could be either, but I don't think that we would make a significant change in the middle of a project. I mean, once it's submitted, that you're kind of committed to what you have on the books. Now, I mean, that's not to say that if somebody came up with some miracle cure for lithium ion, that we wouldn't want to go back and at the very least try to encourage them to implement the new technology. But you're kind of locked into what you've got on the books once it's submitted.
And then that's what I was hinting at, and there's no way to crystal ball this, right? And say this is the new technology that's coming out, it's gonna affect your project, but. There just could be a situation where that comes into effect in the future.
Yeah, and I think that would all be a negotiation with the owner and that, and say, you know, cost effectiveness and is benefit worth the expense type of thing.
It's like the Conrack at the airport, right? We agreed and everybody signed that which one's being built right now? The Ready Return is built right now.
There, yeah.
And then the next one is the Weatherberg, I can't remember the quick turnaround. Or the QTA.
QTA, that's it.
So, but that one specifically states in the agreement with them that they have to build to the current code when they start that. So it was already upfront. Anything else that we've done that I've been a part of, it's been when you applied and when we all said, okay, it was it. So like Mark said, if it's significant enough, it's gonna be in chapter 11. If it's not gonna be in chapter 11, and then it'll literally just be encouragement.
Yeah.
Like we're encouraging people now, get ahead of the game, but you don't have to kind of thing.
I think we're going a little over time, so I'm sure you guys probably, we didn't think we'd make it through 100% for any vote on this anyway. And then I believe based on some new information, right, you wanted to maybe add one more section too, also to the end of this for residential. Yeah, so I think,
Which the state is looking to do
yeah,
the same.
so I think probably we wanna
Okay, Jen, 5 minutes.
schedule another meeting.
Sooner than later.
Yes.
Yes, so we don't forget the dialogue.
Yeah.
So.
Not in January.
So we can pick up at 4207 on the alarm section, and then we'll see this new residential section, and then we'll throw in the building code stuff next.
Just two
And
things.
the building code stuff's much less. We have some building code changes just for code compliance, and then we have energy code changes. Applying at the stage that we have to do, so
And then
that's all right.
Yes, and that's good. Couple of things.
Yes, yeah.
I guess with that, can I ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting for today?
Second.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much.